My brother Lucas always had to outdo me, like buying Mom a $300 espresso machine after I got her a $40 cookbook for Christmas. When I lied and told him my fiancée was pregnant, he got his girlfriend Ashley pregnant just to announce it first at the family barbecue. The look on his face when I pulled him aside and said, "Julie's not pregnant, she never was. I just wanted to see how far you'd take this sick competition," was worth everything that happened next. My brother Lucas was one of those insecure guys who always needed to outdo others. If his friend donated blood, he'd go into a sudden rant about how he donated bone marrow. If someone got with a girl they liked, he'd start telling everyone about how high his body count is. But then he started directly competing with me. He surprised Mom with a $75 spa gift card the day after I gave her a random World's Best Mom mug. On her birthday, he got her an $80 jacket when the sweater I got her was $40. He'd even make these comments that everyone knew what they meant. Mom deserves the best, you know? I just think if you really appreciate someone, you show it. Well, when Christmas came around, I was completely over his bullcrap. I told my parents what I was planning to do, and they thought I was paranoid but agreed to watch. 2 weeks before Christmas, I pulled Lucas aside and told him I went all out this year. Got Mom and Dad this beautiful $350 wine set with crystal glasses and a decanter and everything. He nodded and tried to look uninterested, but I saw his eyes doing that calculation thing. Christmas morning, Lucas showed up with 2 huge boxes. Our parents opened them up and saw the $300 espresso machine for Mom, who didn't even like coffee, and a $200 watch for Dad when he already wore his late father's one. Lucas was beaming and going on about how he wanted to show his appreciation, and family deserves the best. Then when I handed over my actual gifts, a $40 cookbook Mom actually wanted, and a customized $50 wallet for Dad, his face absolutely deflated. I could see him legitimately freaking out. But that's not what, Mom interrupted. She then turned his attention towards him. "Lucas, how'd you afford this?" He got defensive and started stammering about how he got a huge bonus at work. Mom went, "At McDonald's? They gave holiday bonuses," he mumbled. "To part-timers?" Dad asked. Lucas shrugged and changed the subject, but our parents saw it. They actually pulled him on competing with me. Lucas denied everything, but he did chill out for a little while, until 1 year later, when I got engaged at this nice Italian place downtown. I posted one photo on social media. Literally next month, Lucas proposes. He had been dating this girl Ashley for maybe 7 months, and he orchestrated this whole production at the beach. I'm talking red carpet laid out on the sand, and her name spelled in rose petals with candles everywhere, and battery-powered speakers playing their song. 2 weeks later, I booked our venue. 1 week later, Lucas announced they're doing a destination wedding in Hawaii. Then the save the dates happened. We sent ours out saying adults only with an open bar. 2 days later, his arrived saying, "Children welcome. We believe family celebrations should include all family. No alcohol to spoil our special day." The passive aggression was so thick you could cut it with a knife. That's when I decided to really test him. I told my dad first, and he thought I was insane, but agreed to watch what would happen. Then I pulled Lucas aside after Sunday dinner when it was just us having a beer on the porch. "Don't tell anyone yet," I said, "but Julie's pregnant." His eyes widened immediately. "We're waiting to announce it at her bridal shower. Only 8 weeks along. Want it to be special?" He congratulated me and hugged me, but I saw that look in his eyes, that little flicker that meant he was already planning something. 3 weeks later at a family barbecue when everyone was there, Lucas stood up and clinked his beer bottle. "Ashley and I have something to share." She didn't actually look too happy, but he put his hand on her stomach. "We're expecting." The place erupted with Mom crying and Dad shaking his hand and cousins cheering. I was clapping with a big smile and playing the part perfectly. "Congratulations, man. How far along?" "6 weeks, Ashley said while still looking slightly uncomfortable. After the party wound down, I caught Lucas by his car when it was just us in the driveway. "Dude, you really did it. You're gonna be a dad." He was looking at me with his satisfied smirk. "But there's something I gotta tell you." His eyes lit up, probably expecting to hear something else he could use against me. "Julie's not pregnant." His face went white instantly. The color just drained. "What? She's not pregnant. She never was." "But you said—" "I lied." I cut him off. "I wanted to see how far you'd take this sick need to one-up me. And you literally decided to become a dad. Changed your entire life timeline. For what? To hit me at a game of who tells Mom they'll be a dad first?" He was stammering and trying to form words, but nothing came out. "By the way," I said while walking back toward the house, "I told Dad you'd do this. He now really sees who you are. And soon, Ashley, who never wanted kids but got pressured into just so you could one-up me, she'll know it too." The door closed behind me. Through the window, I watched him standing there frozen and still processing what just happened. Lucas stumbled to his car, hands shaking as he tried to process what just happened. Through the window, I watched him make 3 attempts to start the engine before finally driving away. Dad joined me at the window, placing a hand on my shoulder without saying a word. The next morning, Julie found me making coffee at 5 a.m., unable to sleep after yesterday's revelation. She knew something happened with Lucas, but I hadn't told her about the fake pregnancy trap yet. She kissed my cheek and told me whatever I did, he deserved it. 2 hours later, my phone exploded with texts from Lucas, each message more desperate than the last, accusing me of ruining his life, saying Ashley was crying, asking how I could do this to family. I screenshot everything before blocking his number. That afternoon, Mom called asking if I'd heard from Lucas. He hadn't shown up for his shift at McDonald's and wasn't answering her calls. I told her about the texts, but not the details of what triggered them. She sighed deeply, saying this had gone too far. The next day, Dad arrived at our apartment unannounced, wanting the full story about the fake pregnancy trap. When I explained my test, he shook his head but admitted he knew Lucas was competitive, but making Ashley pregnant just to hit me was sick. That evening, Ashley called Julie's phone from the emergency room. She was experiencing cramping and spotting, terrified of losing the baby she never wanted. Lucas was nowhere to be found. Julie and I drove to the hospital immediately. In the hospital waiting room, Ashley broke down crying. She admitted Lucas had pressured her for weeks about getting pregnant after our announcement. She stopped taking birth control without really wanting to, thinking he'd calm down once he won. The doctor confirmed Ashley's pregnancy was viable, but she needed bed rest due to stress. As we were leaving, she grabbed my arm, asking what happened at that barbecue since Lucas hadn't answered her calls since yesterday. I told her the truth about the fake pregnancy trap. Her face cycled through confusion, anger, then a terrible understanding. She had to sit down to process that Lucas got her pregnant for a competition that didn't exist. Over the next few days, Julie and I continued wedding planning, but every vendor meeting felt hollow knowing the chaos unfolding in my family. The florist asked about boutonnieres for groomsmen, and I couldn't answer if Lucas would even be there. Mom texted that Lucas finally came home, locked himself in his childhood room, and wouldn't come out. She could hear him on the phone but couldn't make out the words. Dad wanted to kick down the door while Mom begged for patience. 4 days after the revelation, I found myself parked outside Lucas's apartment building at 2 a.m., not sure why I was there. Part of me wanted to confront him, part wanted to apologize, part wanted to gloat. I drove away without going inside. The next day, Ashley showed up at our apartment with 2 suitcases, having having left Lucas. She was staying with her sister, but needed to talk to me first. She told me she was keeping the baby, but Lucas would never be the father this child deserved. Ashley revealed Lucas had been documenting everything I did on a spreadsheet for 3 years. Every purchase, achievement, and milestone tracked with plans to exceed each one. She showed me photos from his laptop. The spreadsheet included a column titled How to Win, with detailed strategies, including Get Ashley Pregnant if he announces pregnancy, written 6 months ago, long before my fake announcement. He'd been planning this contingency. Mom called in tears later that day. Lucas had just told her we'd been psychologically torturing him for years, that the whole family conspired to make him look bad. He was demanding she choose sides. She sobbed that she didn't even recognize her own son. The following morning, Dad went to Lucas's apartment with an ultimatum. He told Lucas to get therapy or lose all family support. Lucas laughed in his face, claimed he was the only normal one, that we were all jealous of his success. Back at our apartment, Julie suggested we postpone our wedding given the family chaos, but I refused to let Lucas's breakdown affect our plans. I told her that's exactly what he'd want, another competition where he wins by default. A week after the barbecue, I met with our wedding coordinator to confirm details, trying to maintain normalcy. She mentioned the final headcount was due soon. I couldn't bring myself to remove Lucas from the list yet. Ashley texted that Lucas had been calling her 40 times a day, oscillating between begging her to come back and blaming her for ruining his life. She was documenting everything for a restraining order. 8 days after the revelation, Lucas showed up at my office during lunch, looking disheveled and manic. Security wouldn't let him in, but he screamed from the lobby that I destroyed everything and he'd make me pay. There's something really odd about Lucas having a whole spreadsheet tracking his brother's life for 3 years. That's a lot of work just to feel better than someone else. Coworkers stared as security escorted him out. That night, I installed a doorbell camera and new locks. Julie pretended she wasn't scared, but I caught her checking the windows repeatedly. The apartment that felt safe now felt exposed. 10 days after the barbecue, Mom discovered Lucas had been stealing money from their joint emergency account. Small amounts over months totaling $3,000. The money went toward his elaborate proposal and competing with my gifts. Dad admitted he noticed Lucas's competitiveness years ago, but thought it was just sibling rivalry. He apologized for not taking it seriously sooner, saying quietly that he failed both his sons. 12 days after the revelation, Ashley's sister called. Lucas had followed Ashley to her prenatal appointment, caused a scene in the waiting room claiming she stole his baby. Police were called. Ashley was now staying at an undisclosed location. Our cousin texted asking if it was true Lucas was having a mental breakdown. Apparently he'd been messaging extended family with wild accusations about me sabotaging his life since childhood. 2 weeks after the barbecue, Ashley filed for a restraining order with my office incident included as evidence of escalating behavior. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. Lucas would be served papers within 48 hours. Julie and I attended a wedding cake tasting, trying to enjoy normal couple moments. The baker asked about dietary restrictions for guests. I realized I didn't even know if Ashley could attend anymore. 15 days after the revelation, Lucas was served the restraining order papers at work. His manager called Mom to say Lucas had a complete meltdown in front of customers, throwing food and screaming about conspiracy. He'd been terminated. That evening, Mom sat in our living room staring at baby photos of Lucas and me. She asked where she went wrong. I had no answer that would comfort her. 3 days passed in a blur of family meetings and hushed phone calls. The restraining order hearing loomed, and Ashley's stress levels climbed dangerously high. Her doctor ordered complete bed rest after another scare with cramping. I drove her to appointments while her sister worked, watching her grip the door handle every time we passed Lucas's usual haunts. The family group chat exploded at 3 a.m. when Lucas sent a manifesto-style message detailing every perceived slight from childhood. The Christmas when I got a bike and he got books. The science fair where my volcano won and his didn't place. Every birthday party, every report card, every moment he felt overlooked, cataloged with obsessive precision. Reading through his pain mixed with delusional thinking, I recognized genuine hurt buried under years of manufactured competition. Mom called panicking 2 days later. Lucas had emptied his apartment, left his key on the counter with a note saying he was starting fresh where nobody knew him. His phone was disconnected. The restraining order hearing proceeded without him present. Ashley testified about the pressure to get pregnant, the stalking, the manipulation. The judge granted a 2-year protective order in absentia. Ashley's pregnancy stabilized at 22 weeks, but she was seeing a therapist twice weekly to process the trauma. During one session I attended for support, she asked if I felt guilty about the fake pregnancy trap. I admitted I did, every day. The therapist helped us both understand that while my deception was the catalyst, Lucas's response revealed pathology that existed long before. Wedding invitations needed to go out, but Julie and I couldn't agree on whether to send one to Lucas's last known address. We compromised by setting one aside, sealed and stamped, just in case he surfaced. The simple act of addressing an envelope to my brother felt like acknowledging a death. A credit card charge alerted Mom that Lucas was in Portland, Oregon. He'd used their emergency card for a motel. Dad wanted to fly out immediately while Mom insisted they should let him go. Their first real fight in years erupted in our living room. Mom accusing Dad of giving up on their son, while Dad argued Lucas needed to hit bottom before accepting help. I woke at 3 a.m. to find Julie researching self-defense classes on her laptop. She tried to minimize the browser window when I approached, but I'd already seen. The wedding that should have been joyful now carried an undercurrent of fear that Lucas might return to disrupt it. Lucas's ex-girlfriend from college reached out on Facebook with disturbing news. He'd contacted her recently, trying to rekindle their relationship, claiming I'd sabotaged them years ago. She'd blocked him after receiving 30 messages in an hour. She forwarded screenshots where Lucas admitted breaking up with her because I was single at the time, and he couldn't let me win at being alone. He'd destroyed a 3-year relationship just to compete. Mom received a call from a psychiatric facility in Portland. Lucas had checked himself in after a panic attack left him unable to breathe. He was asking for money for treatment. Mom was torn between relief that he was getting help and suspicion this might be another manipulation. Dad flew to Portland against her wishes to verify Lucas's story, their marriage straining under the weight of disagreement. Ashley started showing at 24 weeks, her small bump a constant reminder of Lucas's twisted competition. She decided to tell the child the truth when they were old enough. No fairy tales about their father. She asked me to be the baby's godfather during a particularly difficult therapy session, wanting to ensure her child had positive male role models. Dad confirmed Lucas was actually in treatment at a 30-day program for personality disorders. The facility wouldn't allow visits, but a counselor explained Lucas was beginning to recognize his patterns. The news should have been encouraging, but we'd all learned not to trust Lucas's apparent progress. Julie and I finalized wedding details with vendors, each decision feeling heavier, knowing half my family might not attend. The photographer asked about family portraits, and I found myself unable to explain that my brother might be in a a psychiatric facility or might show up to cause chaos. We planned for both scenarios. Mom started sleeping in the guest room, unable to forgive Dad for going to Portland without her. The stress of Lucas's breakdown was fracturing every relationship in our family. I watched my parents navigate around each other in their own home. Two people who'd been partners for 30 years, suddenly strangers. Ashley's sister called about mysterious baby items appearing on their doorstep. A crib mattress, diapers, formula, all left without notes. They feared Lucas had somehow discovered their location despite the precautions. Security footage from a neighbor revealed the truth. Mom had been making the deliveries, trying to support her grandchild without Ashley knowing. The betrayal of trust cut deep when Ashley confronted Mom. Mom broke down, admitting she didn't know how to handle losing both her son and her grandchild. Ashley softened slightly, but maintained boundaries, explaining that secret deliveries felt like violations after everything Lucas had done. The psychiatric facility contacted Dad about Lucas wanting to write me a letter as part of his treatment. The therapist asked if I'd be willing to receive it. I spent 3 days deciding, ultimately agreeing while dreading what it might contain. Julie and I attended premarital counseling where I finally voiced my deepest fear. What if the competitive sickness was genetic? What if our children inherited this need to win at any cost? The counselor helped us work through the anxiety, distinguishing between learned behaviors and inherent traits. Lucas's letter arrived 2 weeks later. 3 pages of apologies mixed with accusations, ownership mixed with blame shifting. The therapist's note explained this was part of the process, but reading Lucas take responsibility for getting Ashley pregnant while still blaming me for exposing his sickness felt like more manipulation. I found myself checking our doorbell camera obsessively, jumping at every notification. Julie discovered me reviewing footage at midnight, searching for Lucas, who was 2,000 miles away in treatment. The hypervigilance was exhausting, but I couldn't stop. Ashley reached her 20-week ultrasound milestone. It was a boy. She texted me a picture of the scan with just one word: bittersweet. I stared at my nephew's profile, wondering if he'd ever know his father, if Lucas would ever be stable enough for supervised visits. Dad returned from Portland, looking aged by 10 years. He revealed Lucas had admitted to planning something to upstage my wedding, though he hadn't figured out what yet. It was going to be legendary, Lucas had said, something that would prove once and for all who the better brother was. The treatment facility called with devastating news. Lucas had checked himself out against medical advice after learning about the baby's gender. He left a note saying he needed to be a better father than his brother would be. The competitive framing, even in his attempt at responsibility, chilled everyone. Ashley's lawyer filed for emergency sole custody based on Lucas's instability and the restraining order. The hearing was expedited given his discharge from treatment. Ashley was terrified Lucas would return to claim the baby, viewing fatherhood as another competition to win. Lucas's credit card pings traced a path from Portland through Nevada, then Arizona. He was driving east, getting closer each day. Dad called repeatedly, but Lucas wouldn't answer. We could only track him through purchase history, watching helplessly as he approached. A text to Mom made everyone's blood run cold. Lucas wrote that he was coming home to be a father, that he forfeited, that I won. The message's ominous tone prompted me to move Julie to her parents' house temporarily, while I stayed at our apartment alone. Lucas turned his whole life into a game nobody else was playing, and now he's forfeiting like that fixes everything. Someone should tell him you can't rage quit real relationships like they're video games he's losing. If Lucas was coming for anyone, it should be me. Mom admitted she'd been in contact with Lucas's therapist from Portland. The doctor was concerned about Lucas's fixation on the baby as his chance to win at something permanent. The competitive framework hadn't been broken, just redirected toward fatherhood. Lucas arrived in Columbus at 2 a.m., parking outside Ashley's sister's house. Ashley called police immediately, but he wasn't technically violating the restraining order by sitting in his car on a public street. He remained there for 4 hours, just watching, until police convinced him to leave with warnings about the protection order. Ashley's sister spotted Lucas's car circling their neighborhood throughout the day. Everyone was on edge, waiting for him to escalate. The police increased patrols but couldn't arrest him for driving on public roads. The system that should have protected Ashley had loopholes Lucas exploited. Lucas appeared at Dad's workplace the next day, begging for money to hire a lawyer to fight for custody. Dad refused, insisting Lucas get help first. Lucas accused him of choosing sides, of always favoring me before storming out. Dad's co-workers witnessed the entire scene, adding humiliation to heartbreak. I came home to find Lucas sitting on my car hood in the apartment parking lot. My hand moved to my phone, ready to call 911, as he claimed he was better now. He pulled out a folder containing a custody petition he'd filed, claiming Ashley was mentally unstable and I was manipulating her. He'd been documenting her every move since leaving treatment, building a case. The conversation turned dark when I told him to drop the custody case. Lucas laughed bitterly, blaming me for making him sick, saying a son was something that couldn't be faked or taken away. His fixation on the baby as a prize to win rather than a child to raise revealed how little progress he'd made. Security footage showed Lucas returning after I left, trying every window and checking for spare keys. The property manager issued a trespass warning, and I upgraded our security system that night. Every new lock felt like another barrier between me and my brother. Julie called crying from her parents' house. She was scared to have children with me now, afraid the competitive sickness was hereditary. The question of whether our kids might end up like Lucas hung between us, unanswered and terrifying. The emergency custody hearing arrived with Lucas representing himself. He made wild accusations about Ashley's mental state, my manipulation, our parents' favoritism. The judge saw through his performance, but Lucas wouldn't stop talking, couldn't stop competing even in court. When the judge granted Ashley temporary sole custody, Lucas exploded. He screamed about the system being rigged against him just like everything else in his life. Bailiffs restrained him as he lunged toward Ashley's lawyer, his mask of sanity finally slipping completely in public. Lucas was arrested for contempt and disrupting court proceedings. As they led him away, he locked eyes with me, promising this wasn't over, that he didn't lose. Mom collapsed in tears while Dad held her up, both of them finally seeing their son's complete break from reality. The house felt different with Lucas in jail awaiting arraignment. Mom couldn't eat, Dad couldn't sleep, and I couldn't stop wondering if this was my fault for setting the trap that started this spiral. The guilt competed with relief that Ashley was safe, at least temporarily. Ashley met with a therapist specializing in domestic abuse survivors. She was advised to leave the state until after the baby was born, but she refused to let Lucas drive her from her home. Her courage in standing her ground inspired and worried me equally. Julie and I had our first real fight about the wedding. She wanted to postpone indefinitely while I insisted we couldn't let Lucas control our lives. We slept apart for the first time in 2 years, the stress of his breakdown infecting even our strongest relationship. Lucas's arraignment set bail at $50,000 given the restraining order and courtroom outburst. Mom wanted to mortgage the house to pay it. Dad threatened divorce if she did. Their 30-year marriage hung by a thread, another casualty of Lucas's competitive obsession. I connected with Lucas's therapist from Portland via video call. He explained Lucas had narcissistic personality disorder with competitive obsession. My fake pregnancy hadn't caused this, he assured me, but had revealed what was always there. The validation helped but didn't eliminate my guilt. Lucas made bail when his old college roommate posted it, believing Lucas's victim narrative. Within hours, Lucas was posting on social media about being a political prisoner in his own family. Friends began choosing sides, some supporting him without knowing the full story. Our wedding venue called about multiple attempts to cancel our reservation. Other vendors reported similar calls. Lucas was trying to sabotage from afar, turning our wedding into another competition he could win by destroying. Ashley went into premature labor at 24 weeks. Doctors managed to stop it, but she required strict hospital bed rest. Lucas found out through a mutual friend and announced he was going to the hospital to support his child. The restraining order became our only protection. Hospital security stopped Lucas at the entrance. He live-streamed himself being denied access to his dying child, garnering sympathy from strangers online who didn't know about the restraining order or his breakdown. The narrative he spun painted him as a victim rather than a perpetrator. I sat in the hospital chapel at 3 a.m., not religious but needing somewhere quiet to think. Everything I did to protect my family from Lucas just gave him more ammunition to play victim. The trap I'd set to expose him had spiraled beyond anything I'd imagined. Dad visited Lucas at his motel, making one final attempt at reasoning. Lucas showed him printouts from online support groups for alienated fathers where he'd become a hero. His complete detachment from reality was terrifying. He'd found a community that validated his delusions. Mom and Dad started marriage counseling to deal with the trauma of Lucas's breakdown. The counselor said they were both grieving the son they thought they had. Mom still hoped he'd get better while Dad had given up. Their different approaches to grief drove them further apart. Lucas violated the restraining order by sending flowers to Ashley's hospital room with a note calling her his son's mother. Ashley had a panic attack so severe they considered inducing labor for her safety. The flowers meant to manipulate triggered a medical emergency. Lucas was arrested again for restraining order violation. This time, the prosecutor charged him with felony stalking. His previous bail was revoked. He'd remain in jail until trial, which could take months. The system had finally caught up with his escalating behavior. From jail, Lucas called me collect. He accused me of destroying his life over a competition that didn't exist. I corrected him, saying he'd destroyed his own life trying to win a game nobody else was playing. The truth hung between us through the phone static. For the first time, Lucas went silent. Then quietly, he admitted he didn't know how to stop. It was the first genuine moment I'd heard from him in years. I told him we could help him stop, but he had to want it. The vulnerability lasted only seconds before his walls went back up. Lucas agreed to plead guilty in exchange for mandatory psychiatric treatment instead of prison time. Ashley agreed, wanting healing more than punishment. Mom cried with relief while Dad remained skeptical. We'd been down this road before with Lucas claiming to want help. At the plea hearing, Lucas stood before the judge and admitted to stalking, harassment, and violating the restraining order. His voice broke as he acknowledged he needed help. It was the first time he'd taken accountability without deflection or blame. The judge sentenced Lucas to 2 years in a psychiatric rehabilitation facility with possibility of supervised release after 1 year. He'd have no contact with Ashley or the baby until cleared by psychiatric evaluation. The sentence felt both too harsh and too lenient. Before his transfer to the facility, Lucas sent me one last message through his lawyer. He asked me to take care of his son until he could. It wasn't a competition anymore, but a surrender. The brother who'd spent his life trying to hit me was finally admitting defeat. Ashley's baby was stable, and she was released on modified bed rest at 26 weeks. She decided to name him Daniel, after her father, with no trace of Lucas in his name. The baby would define himself, she said firmly, not be defined by his father's illness. Mom and Dad renewed their commitment to each other and to getting Lucas help. They'd attend family sessions at his facility monthly. The family was broken, but not destroyed. There was still hope for healing, even if the scars would always remain. Julie and I met with our wedding coordinator to confirm everything was still on track. We'd decided to keep the date, not to spite Lucas, but to show that life moves forward. The wedding would be smaller now, but the people there would be the ones who mattered. I wrote Lucas a letter he'd receive when he entered treatment. I told him I'd be there when he was ready to be a brother, not a competitor. I didn't know if that day would come, but I wanted him to know the door wasn't closed forever. Ashley joined a support group for women with children whose fathers have personality disorders. She was determined Daniel would break the cycle. When she asked if I'd be his godfather, I accepted immediately. If Lucas couldn't be there, I'd fill that role however I could. Our wedding approached with a mix of joy and sadness. Some family had chosen sides, others couldn't handle the drama. Lucas's therapist said the fake pregnancy didn't cause his problems, but just revealed them. That's like pulling a loose thread and the whole sweater falls apart. But the people who remained were the ones who'd stood by us through the chaos. Quality over quantity, Julie reminded me. As I stood at the altar watching Julie walk down the aisle, I realized Lucas wasn't there to compete with this moment. For the first time in my life, I could just be happy without looking over my shoulder. The freedom felt strange, but wonderful. During the reception, Mom squeezed my hand during the mother-son dance. She whispered that Lucas had called from the facility to wish us well. No sarcasm, no competition, just a simple message of happiness for our future. Maybe there was hope for healing after all. The wedding photos would show a smaller family than planned, but the smiles were genuine. Ashley attended with baby Daniel, just 6 weeks old. He slept through the ceremony, blissfully unaware of the drama that preceded his existence. Looking at him, I saw possibility instead of competition. As Julie and I left for our honeymoon, I felt the weight of the past year lifting slightly. Lucas was getting help, Ashley was building a life for Daniel, and our parents were healing together. The competition that had defined my relationship with my brother for so long was finally over. The facility called 2 weeks after Lucas's transfer with updates about his initial evaluation. The psychiatrist confirmed severe narcissistic personality disorder with competitive features, recommending intensive cognitive behavioral therapy alongside medication management. Mom absorbed every detail during the call, while Dad paced the kitchen, still skeptical about Lucas's chances for genuine change. Ashley's pregnancy reached 28 weeks without further complications. Her support group meetings became a cornerstone of her routine, where she learned coping strategies for co-parenting with someone who had a personality disorder. She practiced boundary-setting exercises and documented everything for future custody arrangements. I returned to work after taking time off for the wedding chaos, finding my desk covered in sympathy cards from co-workers who'd witnessed Lucas's lobby meltdown. The security footage had circulated through the office gossip mill, making me the subject of whispered conversations and pitying looks. Julie and I settled into married life with an underlying tension neither of us acknowledged. She flinched whenever the doorbell rang unexpectedly, and I found myself triple-checking locks before bed. The honeymoon phase was tainted by constant vigilance against a threat locked away and psychiatric care. Mom attended her first family therapy session at Lucas's facility alone when Dad refused to go. She returned home emotionally drained, describing how Lucas had spent the entire hour listing ways the family had wronged him since childhood. The therapist assured her this was typical for early treatment stages. Ashley went into labor at 32 weeks, earlier than ideal, but within viable range. I drove her to the hospital while her sister called ahead to ensure security knew about the restraining order. Even from his facility, Lucas's shadow loomed over the delivery room. Daniel arrived weighing 4 pounds, 2 ounces, requiring a brief NICU stay but otherwise healthy. Ashley held him with fierce protectiveness, whispering promises that he'd never feel the pressure to compete for love or attention. I watched my nephew's tiny fingers curl around hers, hoping she could keep that promise. The facility's monthly report showed Lucas participating in group therapy, but struggling with individual sessions. He'd been placed on mood stabilizers after several aggressive outbursts when challenged about his behavior patterns. The psychiatrist noted his deep-seated belief system would take years to restructure. Dad finally agreed to attend a family session after Mom's persistent requests. They returned home in silence, processing Lucas's accusation that they'd created the competition by comparing their sons throughout childhood. The grain of truth in his distorted worldview stung more than his wild conspiracies. Julie suggested we start trying for children once things stabilized, but I couldn't shake the fear of passing on whatever made Lucas the way he was. We attended genetic counseling where the counselor explained personality disorders resulted from complex interactions between genetics and environment, not simple inheritance. Ashley brought Daniel to meet my parents for the first time when he was 2 months old. Mom held him with tears streaming down her face, seeing both her sons and his features. Dad took photos with shaking hands, documenting the grandchild he could freely love without competition or manipulation. Lucas earned phone privileges after 3 months of treatment. His first call came while I was at work, leaving a voicemail that sounded rehearsed and therapeutic. He acknowledged causing pain without taking full responsibility, using therapy speak that felt hollow but represented progress from his previous denials. The facility social worker contacted us about Lucas's treatment plan, requiring family participation for optimal outcomes. We agreed to monthly video sessions where Lucas would practice healthy communication under supervision. The first session was scheduled for the following week, filling everyone with dread and hope. Ashley returned to work part-time, leaving Daniel with a carefully vetted daycare that had been informed about the custody situation. She carried copies of the restraining order in her diaper bag, wallet, and car, prepared for any scenario where Lucas might appear despite his confinement. Our first video session with Lucas showed him looking healthier, but still carrying that calculating look in his eyes. He read from prepared notes, apologizing for specific incidents, while the therapist guided him through empathy exercises. When he saw Daniel on screen, his face crumbled briefly before reassembling into therapeutic composure. Mom started sleeping in the master bedroom again after she and Dad completed their own couples counseling program. They'd learned to communicate about Lucas without blame or defensiveness, presenting a united front for the first time since his breakdown began. Julie and I decided to start trying for a family after extensive discussions about breaking competitive cycles. We made lists of parenting strategies to ensure our children felt valued for who they were, not what they achieved. The preparation felt like armor against repeating history. Lucas's 6-month evaluation showed significant progress in understanding his disorder, but minimal change in core beliefs. The psychiatrist explained that intellectual understanding came before emotional acceptance, and behavioral change came last. We were still in early stages of a long journey. Ashley met someone at her support group, a single father whose ex-wife had similar issues to Lucas. They bonded over shared experiences and custody battles, taking things slowly while prioritizing their children's stability. Watching her smile again felt like witnessing a small miracle. The facility reduced Lucas's medication after he stabilized, allowing clearer thinking for deeper therapeutic work. His letters became more coherent and less performative, showing glimpses of genuine reflection between lingering defensive passages. Progress came in millimeters, not miles. Daniel started crawling at 8 months, reaching developmental milestones despite his premature birth. Ashley documented everything in a baby book she'd someday share with him, including an age-appropriate version of his father's story. She wanted him prepared for future contact without demonizing Lucas. Our parents sold the family home, downsizing to a condo without Lucas's childhood room as a constant reminder. The process of sorting through decades of memories revealed more evidence of the competition Mom and Dad had inadvertently fostered through well-meaning comparisons and praise. Lucas's 1-year evaluation qualified him for supervised day passes, though nowhere near Columbus per the restraining order. He used them for job training programs, learning computer skills that didn't rely on customer service. The facility reported no incidents during these carefully monitored outings. Julie announced her pregnancy at a small family dinner, the joy tinged with unspoken fears about continuing family patterns. Mom cried happy tears while Dad raised a toast to new beginnings. Ashley offered her support, understanding the unique anxieties we carried. The facility proposed Lucas's transfer to a halfway house for his 2nd year of treatment, allowing more independence while maintaining therapeutic support. The location was deliberately chosen far from Ohio, giving everyone space to heal without constant vigilance. Ashley's new relationship deepened into something serious, with her boyfriend understanding the complexity of Daniel's parentage. They attended couples counseling preemptively, learning to navigate blended family dynamics before problems arose. Daniel called him by his first name, saving Daddy for an uncertain future. Lucas completed vocational training in data entry, finding structure in work that didn't trigger competitive impulses. His therapist noted this was the first job he'd held without comparing himself to others' positions or salaries. Small victories accumulated slowly. Our daughter arrived during a spring thunderstorm, healthy and perfect. We named her Emma, deliberately choosing something with no family connections or competitive associations. Holding her for the first time, I promised she'd never feel like she had to earn our love. Mom and Dad established a trust fund for Daniel's education, ensuring he'd have opportunities regardless of Lucas's future involvement. They consulted lawyers to structure it properly, protecting the money from any potential manipulation while guaranteeing access when needed. Lucas's supervised release was approved after 18 months, contingent on continued outpatient treatment and maintaining distance from Columbus. Why does Lucas's therapist think prepared notes and empathy exercises count as real progress when his eyes still have that calculating look? Something feels off about how quickly everyone's moving forward while he's supposedly changing in that facility. He found an apartment near his halfway house and a full-time data entry position. His probation officer reported full compliance with all requirements. Ashley married her boyfriend in a small ceremony where Daniel served as ring bearer. The wedding felt like a fresh start, untainted by the chaos that had surrounded mine. She'd built a built a life completely separate from Lucas's influence, though his absence was still a presence. Lucas sent a letter requesting permission to video call Daniel on his second birthday. Ashley agonized over the decision before agreeing to supervised calls through the facility's system. The first call lasted 5 minutes, with Lucas reading a children's book while Daniel played with blocks, barely acknowledging the screen. Julie and I bought a house in a different school district, wanting Emma to grow up without whispers about her uncle's breakdown. We kept Lucas's story as something we'd share when she was old enough to understand mental illness without fear or stigma. The 2-year mark arrived with Lucas successfully completing his mandated treatment. The restraining order remained in effect, but he was free to build a life within its constraints. He stayed in his adopted city, reportedly attending support groups for people with personality disorders. Ashley allowed monthly video calls between Lucas and Daniel, always supervised and recorded. Daniel knew Lucas as someone who lived far away and read him stories sometimes. The simple explanation sufficed for a toddler's understanding, with more complex truths waiting for later years. Mom shared that Lucas had started dating someone he met in group therapy, someone who understood his condition and held him accountable. She'd never met the woman, but felt hopeful that Lucas was building relationships based on honesty rather than competition. Our family gatherings evolved into new traditions, without the underlying tension of Lucas's presence. We celebrated Emma's milestones without comparative commentary, focusing on individual growth rather than achievement rankings. The conscious effort gradually became natural habit. Lucas maintained steady employment and treatment compliance through his 3rd year of recovery. His therapist reported continued progress in managing competitive impulses, though complete personality restructuring remained unlikely. He was learning to live with his condition rather than be cured of it. Daniel started preschool with no knowledge of the drama surrounding his conception. Ashley had crafted age-appropriate explanations about families looking different, preparing him for eventual questions about his father. She'd found peace in truth-telling without unnecessary detail. 5 years after that fateful barbecue, our lives had settled into rhythms that no longer revolved around Lucas's chaos. He remained in treatment, held a job, and maintained appropriate boundaries. The restraining order had expired but wasn't needed. Lucas showed no interest in returning to Columbus. Mom received a letter from Lucas on her birthday, simply wishing her well without competitive gift comparisons or manipulative language. She kept it in her jewelry box alongside photos of both her sons from happier times, holding space for the child she'd lost to mental illness. Ashley shared that Lucas had requested a photo of Daniel for his wallet. After much deliberation, she sent one from his 5th birthday party, cropped to show just Daniel's smiling face. It felt like a small kindness that cost her nothing but meant everything to Lucas. I sometimes wondered what might have happened if I'd never set that trap, never exposed Lucas's sickness so dramatically. But watching Emma play with her cousins, seeing Ashley's happiness, and witnessing my parents' hard-won peace, I knew the painful path had led to necessary destinations. Lucas would always be my brother, but he could no longer be my competitor. That game had ended, not with winners or losers, but with everyone finding their own separate peace. The scars remained, but they no longer defined us. We'd all learned to stop keeping score. Time really does fly when nobody's keeping score anymore, huh? Thanks for letting me share my thoughts with you. Catch you on the flip side. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.